Have you ever stopped to think about how the world might be changing right before our eyes without us even noticing? In just a few years, new technologies have emerged, conflicts have taken on new dimensions, and the global economy has begun to reorganize itself in ways that could directly impact our future. But the big question is, where is all of this leading us? The world in 2026 may represent much more than just another year on the calendar. It could mark the beginning of a new phase in global history. So before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, because understanding these changes may be the key to understanding the future that is being shaped right now. The world in 2026 feels, at the same time, familiar and completely different. In many ways, cities continue to function as they always have. People wake up early, go to work, study, consume news, and plan for the future. However, behind this seemingly normal routine, deep forces are reshaping the economy, politics, and technology at a pace that few generations in history have ever witnessed. The year 2026 is not just another point on the calendar. For many analysts, it represents a moment of transition, when trends that began years ago start to reveal their real consequences. Changes that once seemed distant are now beginning to directly affect governments, companies, and individuals across the entire planet. One of the main characteristics of the world in 2026 is the sense of uncertainty. For decades, globalization gave the planet an impression of economic stability, creating a complex network of supply chains that crossed continents and connected economies in ways never seen before. Companies produced components in different countries, raw materials crossed oceans, and finished products reached consumers anywhere in the world within days. This system seemed extremely efficient, and for many years it was presented as an inevitable model of economic development. However, over time, it became clear that this efficiency also concealed deep vulnerabilities, which began to emerge as the global system faced successive crises and political tensions. In recent years, global events have shown that this interdependence can quickly turn into a strategic risk. Disruptions in supply chains, trade disputes between major powers, and regional conflicts have demonstrated how the world economy can be affected when a single link in the chain stops functioning. Essential products such as semiconductors, energy, and industrial inputs have become symbols of this fragility. Countries have realized that excessive dependence on foreign suppliers for critical resources can represent not only an economic risk, but also a political and even national security risk. As a result, governments have begun adopting more aggressive industrial policies, encouraging domestic production and trying to reduce vulnerabilities in sectors considered strategic. This movement marks a significant change in the logic that has guided the global economy over the past decades. For a long time, the main objective of companies was to maximize efficiency and reduce costs, even if that meant spreading production across multiple countries. In 2026, however, priorities are beginning to change. Governments and corporations increasingly talk about resilience, economic security, and strategic autonomy. Instead of relying entirely on global supply chains, many countries are trying to develop internal capabilities to produce critical technologies, energy, and essential products. This transition does not mean the end of globalization, but it suggests that the world may be entering a new phase in which economic efficiency shares space with geopolitical and strategic concerns. At the same time that the global economy is undergoing transformations, the struggle for power among major nations is becoming increasingly evident. For much of the 21st century, the United States maintained a dominant position on the international stage, supported by its economic strength, cultural influence, and military capability. However, in recent decades, other regions have begun to gain prominence, particularly in Asia. Countries with large populations, strong economic growth, and technological ambitions have started to play an increasingly important role in shaping the rules of the international system. As a result, the global balance of power has begun to shift, creating a more complex and less predictable scenario than the one that prevailed after the end of the Cold War. In 2026, this new balance translates into an increasingly multipolar world, in which different economic and political blocs compete for influence on multiple fronts. This competition rarely occurs in an open or militarized way, as in traditional conflicts of the past. Instead, much of the dispute takes place through economic and technological strategies. Investments in infrastructure, trade agreements, financing of projects in emerging countries, and control of supply chains become instruments of power just as important as armies or military arsenals. In this context, every strategic decision, from the construction of a port to the development of a new technology, can have profound geopolitical implications. One of the most important arenas of this global competition is technological dominance. In an increasingly digital world, having an advantage in areas such as artificial intelligence, advanced computing, communication networks, and semiconductor production can determine which countries will have greater influence in the coming decades. In 2026, governments and companies are investing billions of dollars in research, innovation, and development to secure leadership in these sectors. The technological race is not limited to the development of new tools, but also involves the control of data, technological standards, and digital infrastructure that will support the economy of the future. Alongside this competition between nations, technology continues to deeply transform people's daily lives. In recent years, artificial intelligence systems have evolved from academic experiments into widely used tools across various sectors of the economy. In 2026, advanced algorithms are capable of analyzing enormous volumes of information in seconds, identifying complex patterns, and offering recommendations that help companies make strategic decisions more quickly and accurately. This processing capability allows organizations to optimize logistics chains, predict market behavior, and improve the efficiency of countless productive processes. This technological revolution brings significant productivity gains, but it also raises important debates about the future of work. Many activities that once required intensive human analysis can now be performed, at least partially, by automated systems. Professions linked to repetitive tasks or highly data-driven processes are undergoing transformation, and in some cases, replacement. At the same time, new opportunities are emerging in areas related to the development, training, and supervision of these technologies. Rather than completely eliminating human work, artificial intelligence tends to redefine roles and require new skills, creating a labor market that is constantly evolving. This technological advancement also deeply transforms competition between countries. In an increasingly digital world, mastering strategic technologies has ceased to be merely an economic advantage and has become a central element of geopolitical power. Throughout history, nations that controlled essential resources, such as maritime routes, oil, or industrial capacity, were able to exert great influence over the international system. In 2026, however, many of these traditional elements of power begin to share space with a new type of resource: technology. Advanced semiconductors, artificial intelligence systems, cloud computing infrastructure, and high-speed communication networks are becoming fundamental pillars for the global economy and for the national security of many countries. Among these elements, few are as strategic as semiconductors. These small electronic components are present in virtually all modern devices, from smartphones and computers to cars, medical equipment, and advanced military systems. Without access to sophisticated chips, much of the digital economy simply cannot function. For this reason, in 2026 several nations are investing billions of dollars in the construction of factories, research centers, and their own production chains in order to reduce their dependence on external suppliers. The struggle for dominance in this industry has become a true global race, involving governments, multinational companies, and strategic alliances between countries seeking to guarantee secure access to these critical technologies. As this technological competition intensifies, the global economy goes through a delicate period of structural adjustments. For many years, especially after major economic crises, central banks around the world adopted stimulus policies to maintain economic growth. Extremely low interest rates and massive liquidity programs helped companies and governments expand investments, boost financial markets, and sustain consumption. However, these measures also contributed to a significant increase in global debt. In 2026, many countries find themselves facing a scenario in which public and private debt have reached historically high levels, creating additional pressure on economic and fiscal policies. In this context, governments face a complex dilemma. On one hand, maintaining stimulus policies can help sustain economic growth and prevent sharp economic slowdowns. On the other hand, continuing to expand spending and credit may further increase debt levels and fuel inflationary pressures. This delicate balance becomes even more difficult in a global environment marked by volatility in financial markets, changes in supply chains, and geopolitical tensions that affect the prices of energy, food, and raw materials. In 2026, managing these variables requires increasingly careful decisions, as mistakes in economic policy can generate impacts that quickly spread throughout the international financial system. Another factor that deeply influences the world in 2026 is the energy transformation. For more than a century, oil has been the main fuel of the global economy, shaping political alliances, trade routes, and military strategies. However, The transition toward cleaner energy sources is gradually beginning to change this reality. Countries are increasingly investing in solar energy, wind power, batteries, and other technologies capable of reducing carbon emissions. Although oil still plays a central role in the economy, energy diversification is creating new centers of power and redefining the strategic importance of certain regions. Environmental issues are also gaining increasing prominence. Extreme weather events, changes in temperature patterns, and growing concerns about sustainability are pressuring governments and companies to adopt more responsible policies. In 2026, many organizations already incorporate environmental criteria into their investment and production decisions. This change does not occur only for ethical reasons, but also for economic ones, as consumers, investors, and regulators increasingly demand transparency and commitment to sustainable practices. The result is a gradual transformation across various sectors, from heavy industry to the financial market. In the social sphere, the world faces complex challenges related to demographics and the labor market. In many developed countries, the population is aging rapidly, placing increasing pressure on pension systems and public health care. At the same time, several emerging regions have large young populations searching for economic opportunities. This demographic contrast influences migration patterns, public policies, and economic development strategies around the world. In 2026, governments attempt to balance these forces, seeking ways to stimulate economic growth while maintaining social stability. Another element that defines the global landscape is the speed at which information circulates. Digital networks and communication platforms have completely transformed the flow of news and opinions. In a matter of minutes, local events can gain worldwide attention, influencing financial markets, political decisions, and public perceptions. This connectivity creates opportunities for greater transparency and social participation, but it also increases challenges related to misinformation, polarization, and the manipulation of narratives. In a highly connected environment, controlling information becomes almost as important as controlling physical resources. The international financial system is also undergoing important changes. For decades, traditional currencies dominated global transactions, but the emergence of new financial technologies has opened space for alternatives. In 2026, digital currencies, instant payment systems, and decentralized platforms are gaining increasing space in the global economy. Central banks are studying or implementing their own digital currencies, while investors explore alternative assets that promise greater independence from the traditional financial system. This process is still evolving, but it already indicates that the future of money may look very different from the past. These transformations occur simultaneously and create an environment of constant change. For governments, companies, and individuals, the ability to adapt quickly becomes an essential skill. Strategies that worked in the past do not always guarantee success in an increasingly dynamic world. In 2026, the ability to interpret global trends and anticipate changes becomes a valuable strategic advantage. Those who can understand the forces shaping the international landscape are better positioned to make informed decisions and prepare for the future. Despite all these challenges, the world in 2026 also presents unprecedented opportunities. Technological advances make it possible to solve complex problems with a level of efficiency that was once unimaginable. New business models are emerging across various sectors, driven by digitalization and the global integration of knowledge. International initiatives seek to address shared issues such as climate change, food security, and sustainable development. Although the path ahead remains uncertain, history shows that periods of transformation often generate progress and innovation. When observing the global panorama, it becomes clear that 2026 does not represent merely an isolated moment, but rather part of a larger process of historical transition. The international system that was built throughout the 20th century is gradually being reshaped, giving way to new power structures, new technologies, and new forms of economic organization. For many experts, we are entering a phase that may define the direction of the coming decades. The world of today is still being written, and the decisions made now will have profound impacts on the future. In the end, understanding the world in 2026 means recognizing that we are living through a moment of historical transition. At the same time that new technologies advance at an accelerated pace, profound economic transformations and geopolitical disputes between major powers are reshaping the global balance. This combination of factors creates an extremely complex scenario, in which definitive predictions become increasingly difficult. However, even in the face of so many uncertainties, one thing seems clear. We are witnessing a reconfiguration of the international system that may influence how societies generate wealth, distribute power, and organize their economies in the coming decades. The world is changing before our eyes, and many of these transformations are only just beginning. If you made it this far, it's because you also want to better understand the changes that are shaping the future of the planet. That's why, if this type of analysis interests you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to follow the upcoming videos. And of course, leave your like to help the content reach more people who also want to understand what is really happening in the world. Because in a scenario as complex as the one we are living in, information and reflection are essential tools to see beyond the headlines and understand the forces that are shaping the future.